I need you to listen carefully, because if you just read the title and think you already understand what happened to me, you don't. What happened in the water was only the beginning. What waited for me on land, that was something no training, no instinct, no warning could have prepared me for. And to this day, when people ask me how I survived the shipwreck, I always tell them the same thing. Surviving the ocean wasn't the hard part. Surviving what came after was. It started on a night that felt normal enough to be forgettable. We were a small group traveling on a mid-sized vessel. Nothing fancy, nothing fragile, just a sturdy transport boat used mostly for cargo and a handful of passengers. I wasn't a tourist. I wasn't looking for adventure. I was simply returning from a work trip, the kind of routine travel I had done so many times that I barely paid attention to the details anymore. Maybe that was my first mistake, assuming routine meant safety. The weather forecast had mentioned strong winds, but nothing alarming. I remember standing on deck, watching the clouds stretch across the sky like long scratches of gray. The captain didn't seem worried. The crew was relaxed. Even the sea itself looked calm. Maybe too calm, like it was hiding something under the surface. Hours later, everything changed so fast I still struggle to remember the exact order. One minute I was half asleep in my bunk, listening to the hum of the engine, and the next I was thrown sideways as the whole boat trembled so violently it felt like the ocean was trying to rip it apart. I heard shouts, metal hitting metal, something sliding across the floor. I rushed out of the cabin and saw crew members sprinting toward the bow, yelling instructions I couldn't understand, swallowed by the wind. When I stepped outside, the rain hit me like gravel. The sea, which had been calm earlier, was now a massive shifting wall of dark water. Waves crashed over the deck and dragged equipment across the floor. The boat leaned so hard to one side that for a moment I thought it would flip. People were grabbing onto rails, ropes, anything that wouldn't detach. The captain shouted something about stabilizing, but I could barely hear him over the wind. Then I felt the impact, something colliding with the hull from below. It wasn't like hitting a rock or debris. It was deeper, heavier, like the ocean itself had punched us. Everything shook again, harder this time. A crew member ran past me and yelled at me to grab a life jacket. I didn't argue. I put it on with shaky hands, trying to focus on the buckles instead of the chaos around me. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. From that moment, everything was noise and darkness. Someone grabbed my arm and pushed me toward the lifeboats, but before we could reach one, the boat leaned again, so violently that everyone on the deck slid. I remember hitting my shoulder on a rail, the shock of cold water flooding my legs, the weight of the sea pulling me down as the vessel tilted even more. I don't remember falling overboard. I only remember the sudden silence underwater, the world muted except for the pressure around my ears. When I surfaced, gasping, the boat was already far from me, its lights glowing faintly through the rain before disappearing behind another wave. What followed was a blur of survival instinct, kicking, breathing, swallowing salty water, catching glimpses of people, debris, and the broken silhouette of the vessel drifting away. I screamed for help, even though I knew no one could hear me in that storm. I remember thinking that the ocean didn't even need to be cruel. It just needed to be patient. The current dragged me relentlessly. I lost sight of everyone else, lost track of time. My arms burned, my throat burned, my chest felt heavy. Every wave felt like being pushed backward after taking one step forward. I tried to stay calm, telling myself that land had to be somewhere nearby. But in the darkness, with the storm raging, direction became meaningless. Then I saw it, a faint shadow far ahead, barely distinguishable from the night sky. A coastline, maybe. I aimed for it, even if it was only my imagination offering false hope. Anything was better than being swallowed by the ocean with nothing to hold on to. The swim felt endless. My body wanted to let go so many times that I lost count. Eventually, The storm calmed just enough for me to see the outline of land more clearly. Trees, rocks, a curved strip of shore. The relief I felt was so overwhelming that for a moment I almost cried, but I didn't have the strength. By the time I reached the shallow waters, every movement hurt. My legs shook as I tried to stand. My hands were numb. I stumbled out of the water, collapsing on the sand, coughing and shaking uncontrollably. The rain continued, though softer now, tapping against the leaves above me like a nervous whisper. I remember lying there for a long time, too exhausted to move, too drained to think. The only thing I was aware of was the sound of the waves behind me and the forest in front of me, a dense, dark mass of trees. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know if anyone else had made it. But for a brief, fragile moment, I believed the worst was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. The forest didn't look threatening at first glance, but the deeper I looked, the more I sensed something unsettling. Not a specific danger, just wrongness. Like the shoreline was safe territory, and everything beyond that invisible line belonged to something else entirely, something that didn't want me there. Still, I had no choice. I needed shelter, warmth, something to drink. My throat felt like it was full of sandpaper. So I forced myself up and walked toward the tree line. The air smelled different as soon as I stepped closer. Humid, heavy, carrying an earthy scent mixed with something metallic I couldn't identify. I found a narrow path between the trees and followed it. Branches brushed against my shoulders. Leaves stuck to my wet clothes. The deeper I went, the darker it became, until the forest swallowed the last traces of daylight. The silence was unnerving. No birds, no insects, no wind. It was the kind of silence that felt intentional. After walking what felt like hours, I came across something strange. Footprints. Human footprints. Dozens of them. Some deep, some faint, all heading in the same direction. They looked recent. My heart pounded. Someone lived here. Someone could help me. I followed them eagerly at first, then cautiously. Because the further I walked, the more I noticed that the footprints weren't uniform. Some were barefoot, some were extremely small, others were oddly wide, as if the feet that made them had an unusual shape. And a few were heavy, too deep for a normal person. Still, I kept going. Eventually, I reached a clearing. At the center stood a small wooden structure, something between a hut and a cabin. The walls looked old, patched with mismatched planks. The door was partially open, hanging crookedly. There were no windows, just gaps between the wood. I called out. No response. I stepped inside. The air was colder. The smell was stronger. The same metallic scent I'd smelled earlier, but now concentrated, mixed with damp wood and something bitter. My eyes slowly adjusted to the dark interior. There was a table, a few empty bottles, some torn blankets on the floor. In the corner, I saw ropes. Dozens of them, all coiled neatly, like someone had taken great care in keeping them organized. And then, I noticed the carvings. They covered the walls, symbols, drawings, shallow cuts forming shapes I couldn't interpret. Circles connected by lines, human figures with exaggerated limbs, spirals, strange patterns that repeated over and over, as if whoever drew them had been obsessed. The longer I stared, the more uneasy I felt. My skin prickled. My heart thudded harder. Something inside me screamed to leave, to get out of that hut before I found out who, or what, made those carvings. But before I could step out, I heard it. A sound from behind the hut. Not an animal. Not a person coughing or speaking. It was breathing. Slow, heavy breathing. And it was getting closer. My entire body froze. I didn't dare move. I didn't even breathe. The steps, if you could call them that, were uneven, as if the thing walking around the hut wasn't built to move like a human. They circled slowly, almost curious, almost deliberate. I backed away from the wall, one silent step at a time. The floor creaked lightly under my foot, and the breathing outside stopped instantly. Silence. Then the breathing resumed. Faster now, louder, more agitated. Whatever it was had heard me. It knew I was inside. I didn't think. I ran. I burst out of the hut and sprinted back toward the forest path. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see what was behind me. I just ran until my lungs burned and my legs trembled. The forest seemed even darker now, the air thicker, every tree trunk looking like a silhouette watching me. I didn't stop until I tripped over something and fell to the ground. When I turned to see what it was, my stomach dropped. Another footprint. But this one was fresh, and it wasn't human. Not even close. I scrambled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. And that's when I heard it. A distant guttural sound echoing through the forest. Not a roar. Not a growl. Something in between. Something that sounded frustrated and intelligent. I knew then that I wasn't alone on that island, and whatever lived there had just found out I was too. I don't know how long I sat there staring at that footprint. It wasn't enormous, not the kind of exaggerated shape people imagine when they hear about creatures in remote forests, but it was wrong. Too long in the front, too narrow in the middle, with a strange curvature that didn't match anything I'd ever seen. And the depth. It was pressed so firmly into the damp soil that whatever made it had real weight behind it. That guttural sound echoed again, closer this time, and it snapped me back into motion. I forced myself up, even though my legs felt like wet paper. Every instinct in my body screamed for me to run, but I didn't even know which direction was safe anymore. The forest looked completely different now, as if the darkness had reshaped the roots behind my back. I moved the only way I could, slowly at first, then faster, trying to avoid snapping branches or making noise. The trees around me were dense, tangled with vines and thick roots. I felt the sensation of being watched, a pressure on the back of my neck that made every hair stand up. I kept glancing over my shoulder but saw nothing, just trees and shadows. The path eventually split into two. I froze. The left route looked narrower, more overgrown, as if not many things passed through it. The right was clearer, but the ground had more footprints. Some human, some not. If I took the left path, I risked getting lost. If I took the right path, I risked being followed. I chose the left. I couldn't explain why. I just knew that whatever had been circling the hut was more likely to use the clearer routes. The deeper I went, the stranger the forest became. At one point, I started noticing ropes tied between trees, almost invisible in the dark. Some were high up, some near the ground, all stretched tightly like traps or signals. The rope looked old, frayed, and covered in moss, but the way they were arranged felt intentional, too precise to be random. I carefully avoided them, stepping over and ducking under the ones I could see. My breathing was shallow, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure anything nearby could hear it. The metallic smell I'd sensed earlier grew stronger, clinging to the air like a warning. After a long stretch of walking, I spotted a faint light through the trees. My heart leapt. It flickered, warm and orange. Fire. Someone had to be there. I pushed through the brush, ignoring the branches scratching my arms and the sharp leaves cutting my skin. But when I reached the clearing, I stopped dead in my tracks. The light wasn't a campfire. It was a lantern hanging from a wooden pole stuck into the ground, and underneath it, there were objects. Dozens of them, items scattered in a rough circle as if arranged with purpose. Shoes, pieces of fabric, small personal belongings, bracelets, water bottles, bits of cloth, a torn backpack, a cracked phone case, all worn, all weathered, all belonging to different people. I recognized the implication instantly. I wasn't the first person to end up on this island, and none of the objects looked new. A cold wave of dread washed over me. I crouched down, inspecting the items carefully. Many had scratches or deep cuts, as if something had dragged or pulled them. Some were stained with that same metallic scent that hung in the hut. I found a notebook among the scattered belongings, its cover faded and soft from moisture. Most of the pages were illegible, but a few words stood out, written in frantic, shaky handwriting. Not alone. They watch from the trees. Don't let them corner you. No light. The last note was scribbled repeatedly, almost carved into the paper. No light at night. As if on cue, the lantern flickered. Then the air changed. You don't realize how much silence weighs until you feel it shift. The forest's stillness was replaced by something else. Movement. Faint, almost imperceptible, but real. Leaves rustling, twigs snapping, shapes shifting behind the tree line. I turned slowly. Something moved between the trees, then another, and another. Not fully visible, but close enough to sense. I could feel their presence like heat on my skin, even though the air was cold. I stepped backward, careful not to trip over the objects on the ground. The lantern flickered again, dimmer this time. My stomach twisted as I remembered the last line in the notebook. No light at night. The lantern went out. Everything disappeared. I couldn't see my own hand in front of me. The darkness was absolute, crushing. The forest erupted with sound, rustling, snapping, breathing. Multiple breaths, not just one. Some shallow, some deep, all around me. Moving closer. I didn't think. I ran. I sprinted blindly through the trees, arms out to avoid smashing into a trunk. The ground shifted under my feet. Branches whipped my face. Something tore my sleeve. I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, deliberate, coordinated. Not human footsteps. Too light, too quick, too close together. I stumbled down a small slope and rolled before scrambling back to my feet. The forest echoed with those guttural sounds again. Not just one, but several overlapping, coming from every direction. I didn't stop until I saw a faint glow ahead, a pale bluish light. For a moment, I feared it was another trap, but as I got closer, I realized it was moonlight reflecting on water, a river. I ran straight toward it, crashing through the underbrush, and nearly fell into the rushing stream. The water was fast, cold, slicing through the darkness like a silver blade. The current looked strong enough to drag me away instantly. I didn't care. Behind me, the noises grew louder, closer. I stepped into the river. The shock of the freezing water punched the air out of my lungs. The current pulled at my legs, threatening to take me down. I forced myself deeper until the water reached my chest. My balance faltered. I grabbed onto a branch sticking out from the riverbank just to keep myself from being swept away. Then I saw them. Figures on the opposite bank, partly hidden by the trees, watching. Their silhouettes were wrong. Angular, hunched, with limbs that bent slightly too far. Their heads were tilted, as if studying me. Even from across the river, I could see the slow, rising and falling motion of their breathing. One of them stepped forward, and the moonlight caught part of its shape. I still refuse to describe it fully. Not because I'm scared someone won't believe me, but because some things shouldn't be given form outside the darkness they come from. They didn't enter the river. They just watched, as if waiting. The current pulled harder. My hand slipped on the branch. I felt my grip weakening, my legs shaking uncontrollably. I had two choices: stay and freeze, or let the river take me wherever it decided. So I let go. The current yanked me downstream instantly. I was thrown underwater, spun around like a rag doll, struggling for breath. Rocks scraped against my legs and my side. Each time I surfaced, I gulped air and went under again. The cold was like needles stabbing every inch of my body, but I didn't fight the current. I let it take me, hoping it would carry me far from whatever those things were. Eventually, the water slowed. I managed to swim toward the shore, grabbing onto wet roots to haul myself out. My whole body trembled violently. My fingers were numb, but I was alive, and I was somewhere new. This part of the forest felt different, less oppressive, less suffocating. I crawled up a steep bank and collapsed under a large tree, gasping for air. My whole body hurt. I didn't know how long I lay there before I realized something strange. I heard birds. Not many, but some. Normal forest sounds, a faint chirping in the distance. The kind of sound completely absent from the other side of the river. It gave me a sliver of hope. When the trembling finally eased enough for me to stand, I followed the faint sounds deeper into the forest. Every step was agony. Every branch felt like a threat. But daylight finally started breaking through the canopy, soft and weak, but enough to see where I was going. The forest gradually opened up, revealing a wide clearing. In the center stood something that made my knees buckle with relief. A wooden structure. Not a hut like the one before. This one was larger, sturdier, with windows, a roof reinforced with metal sheets, and smoke rising from a small chimney pipe. There were wooden crates stacked against the walls, and a fenced area nearby that looked like it once held livestock. The planks were newer. The door was intact. Someone lived here, and recently. I approached slowly, calling out in a cracked voice. No answer. I knocked. Nothing. But the door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The interior was surprisingly clean. A small table, 2 chairs, a makeshift bed with blankets neatly folded, a shelf full of canned food, jars, tools, and a lantern with fresh oil. There was a faint smell of herbs and something floral, a scent so normal and safe compared to the metallic odor from before that it almost brought me to tears. But on the table, I saw something that froze me. A map, drawn by hand, detailed, and the island was marked with clear boundaries. On the southern half, the part I had crossed through, someone had drawn a thick black line and written one word above it. Forbidden. Under that, smaller handwriting added, "Do not enter after sunset. Do not cross the river. They come out when the light dies." I sank into one of the chairs, my body finally giving in to exhaustion. I don't know when exactly I fell asleep, but when I woke up, sunlight filled the cabin. For the first time since the shipwreck, I felt a moment of real safety, but safety didn't last long. A shadow appeared outside the window. Someone, or something, was standing just out of view. Not one of those creatures. I could tell by the posture. This figure was upright, unmoving, watching the cabin silently. I slowly stood up, my heart pounding, unsure whether to hide or confront whoever it was. Then the figure stepped closer, revealing a human face. A man, weathered, sunburned, with a thick beard and eyes so tired they looked carved from stone. He stared at me for a long moment before finally speaking in a rough, strained voice. "You shouldn't be here. Not alone." I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could say anything, he added, "And if you survived the other side, then you need to tell me exactly what you saw." His expression shifted into something between fear and disbelief. Because no one crosses that river and lives. He closed the door behind him, and that's when I realized the real horror wasn't the creatures themselves. It was the truth he was about to tell me. The truth of what lived on that island, and why so many never left. I told him everything, about the footprints, the hut, the symbols carved into the wood, the lantern circle, the river, and the silhouettes watching me from the trees. His face kept tightening with each detail, his jaw clenching like he was fighting memories he wished he could bury. When I finished, He rubbed his hands over his face and whispered, almost to himself, "They're getting bolder." I asked him what they were. He hesitated for a long time before answering. They were here long before any of us. Not animals, not people. Something in between. They stay hidden until the light fades, and then they hunt anything that enters their territory. He said there used to be more survivors on the island. Fishermen, travelers, people who washed ashore just like I did. They built shelters, formed small groups, tried to survive. But one by one, they vanished after venturing into the southern forest. They left behind their belongings, their shelters, their paths. But never their bodies, he said quietly. I understood instantly. The creatures didn't leave anything behind. He told me there was a small boat hidden on the northern coast, but the journey there was long, and the forest was unpredictable. We would have to travel only during the day, staying vigilant, avoiding old trails, and never, ever leaving food exposed. He offered me water, a blanket, and a place to rest. But not comfort, not reassurance, just fact. And that's when I realized something that chilled me more than the river had. He didn't ask if anyone else from my ship survived. Not once. Not even out of politeness. It wasn't an oversight. It was because he already knew the answer. The next morning, we left the cabin before sunrise. He walked ahead with a handmade spear, moving quietly, scanning every direction. I followed close behind, stepping where he stepped, avoiding anything that looked even slightly disturbed. At one point, we reached a fork in the forest. He paused, staring at two sets of tracks. One human, one not. The human tracks were old. The other set wasn't. "We keep moving," he whispered. As we walked, I felt the trees closing in around us. The forest was alive with noise now. Birds, insects, rustling leaves. But every sound made me jump, expecting something else to emerge. We reached a ridge overlooking the northern coastline. Below us, hidden between rocks, was a small boat covered with a tarp. Relief washed over me so intensely I almost collapsed. But then I noticed something the man noticed too. The tarp was torn, freshly. He stepped forward slowly, spear raised, scanning the rocks around us. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. The waves below crashed against the shore, masking other sounds. Then, from behind a boulder, something moved. But this time, it wasn't the creatures. It was another person. A woman, thin, worn, shaking like she hadn't slept in days. Her clothes were dirty, her hair tangled, her eyes wide with panic. She looked at us like we were ghosts. "You have to leave," she whispered, voice trembling. "You have to leave now. They followed you. They crossed the river." The man's face went pale. "That's not possible." She shook her head violently. "They followed you. I saw them." A guttural sound echoed from the forest behind us. Not far away. Not across the river. Right there. The man grabbed my arm with a grip so tight it hurt. "Run!" We sprinted down the ridge toward the boat, the woman running with us. Behind us, branches snapped. Leaves exploded outward. Shadows darted between the trees with terrifying speed. The man shoved us into the boat and cut the rope tying it to the rock. The woman held on to me, shaking uncontrollably. He pushed the boat off the shore and jumped in, grabbing the oars. The creatures burst through the tree line. I only saw them fully for a second, and that second is burned into my memory forever. They were wrong. Every part of them wrong. Familiar enough to register as living beings, but twisted just enough to break any attempt of understanding. They moved in a way that defied logic, like their joints bent in ways they shouldn't, like gravity didn't apply the same way to them. Their faces were... I won't describe their faces. Some details should stay buried. The man rowed harder than I thought humanly possible. The creatures reached the water's edge, but didn't enter it. They paced back and forth, watching us drift away. Their breathing was loud enough to echo across the waves. The woman sobbed into her hands. The man kept rowing, his knuckles white. For a long time, none of us spoke. We didn't stop rowing until the island was a distant silhouette, barely visible on the horizon. Hours later, a patrol boat spotted us. The crew pulled us aboard, wrapped us in blankets, gave us water, and asked thousands of questions. I answered what I could. The man answered little. And the woman, she just stared at the floor, whispering to herself. I never saw either of them again. They were taken somewhere else, separated for questioning. Authorities told me the island appeared abandoned. They said they found no creatures, no huts, no footprints, nothing but forest and rocks. They said maybe I was confused, dehydrated, traumatized. They said hallucinations weren't uncommon after extreme stress. But here's the thing. They never found the map. They never found the symbols carved into the hut walls. They never explained the deep prints in the soil. And when I asked what happened to the patrol that went to search the island, they stopped giving me answers. So yes, I survived the shipwreck. But the real horror was on land. And even now, every time I close my eyes, I still hear it. That slow, hungry breathing, coming from the trees. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. Your time means more than you know. If you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video with someone who loves true survival tales. Your support keeps this channel alive.